Out with the old, in with me, my mother-in-law declared as she barged into our home right after my mom's death. Deal with it or go. But that smirk vanished the second my husband said, "Mom, didn't you know? I'm not the owner." I'm Madison, 30 years old, and my older brother Kai has been my rock for as long as I can remember. 5 years older than me. Always protective. Always there. Growing up, whenever classmates excluded me or made me feel small, Kai would step in. He'd talk to them himself, ask them to be kind, not because our parents told him to, but because he genuinely cared. Even during my rebellious teenage years, when I was fighting with our parents over everything, he never turned his back on me. He'd argue with them on my behalf, but never took his frustration out on me. "Don't worry about what people think," he used to say. "I've got your back, Madison." I admired his confidence, the way he could speak his mind without flinching. I envied that. Then our dad passed away from cancer while I was still in college. That loss shattered our world. One day, in a quiet moment, Kai said something that surprised me. He talked about how grateful he was to our parents and teachers, how they shaped him despite all his teenage antics. Hearing that from someone who rarely opened up left a deep impression on me. It stirred something inside, a desire to do the same for others, to support kids the way our parents and teachers had supported us. That's when I decided to become a teacher. While everyone else stressed over corporate interviews, I poured everything into preparing for the teacher certification exams. I still remember the day I passed. I told Mom and Kai, and the look on his face was unforgettable. He smiled. "Wow, Madison, I didn't see that coming. Good luck. You'll be great." I landed a teaching position not long after. But the job was far more demanding than I imagined, constantly swamped with lesson planning, grading, mentoring students. Staying late became routine. When most people switched to remote work, I still braved packed commuter trains every morning. Weekends? Not really off. I supervised clubs and extracurriculars. Living alone for the first time didn't help either. Juggling work and household chores with no help, the exhaustion hit hard. But even then, I felt something meaningful in what I did, like I was making a difference. As I settled into this new rhythm, though, I started noticing something off with Mom. Phone calls became confusing. She'd forget what we just talked about. I brushed it off at first, thought she was just tired or distracted. But when I went home to visit, I was stunned. The house was a mess, trash everywhere, dishes unwashed, and she seemed bewildered by it all. She claimed she'd already cleaned, or forgot it needed doing. I called Kai right away. We took her to the hospital. That's when we got the diagnosis. Early-stage dementia, mild cognitive impairment. It hit us like a ton of bricks. Ever since Dad passed, she'd become more withdrawn, and none of us realized just how far things had progressed. Naturally, I began visiting home more often, talking with Kai about how we could support her long-term. Around that time, when I was running on fumes, juggling school, home, and emotional stress, a close friend dragged me out for a drink, insisted I needed a break. That's when I met Elijah. Elijah worked for an international company and immediately took an interest in my job teaching French. He was kind, steady, always made me feel like I mattered. Our dates became little islands of peace in my storm of a schedule. Just grabbing a bite with him melted all the stress away. After 2 years of dating, he invited me to a private dinner in a quiet corner of New York City. Not for an anniversary or birthday, just a regular evening. And then, out of the blue, he pulled out a ring. We'd build a duplex home so we could live close to my mom and care for her without sacrificing our own space. It felt like the right move. But not long after we started planning, Elijah's mom began contacting me more frequently. Until then, we'd only exchanged pleasantries, holiday greetings, polite small talk. She never showed much interest in my life. But now, she was calling all the time, asking oddly specific questions. "So, I heard you're building a new place. What's the layout like? Can I take a peek at the blueprints?" Casual at first, but the next thing I knew, she was offering endless suggestions. "The kitchen should be bigger. Put the stairs over there instead. Add a guest room near the living room. You'll want floor heating. It gets so cold in that area." It was overwhelming and strange. She wasn't going to live with us, so why all the interest? Elijah stepped in to diffuse things whenever he could, trying to keep the peace. But I couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to this than simple curiosity. Eventually, I told Elijah what had been on my mind. I think your mom wants to move in with us. She keeps pushing herself into the design. Even when you talk to her, she calls me directly. I'm starting to feel really uncomfortable. He nodded. You're probably right. Don't stress about it. I'll handle it. Just ignore any calls or messages from her. Won't that hurt her feelings? Maybe, but she's crossing boundaries. If she keeps it up, it's okay to let it go to voicemail. So, with Elijah's full support, I stopped engaging with her. The house plans were finalized. Construction began. For a while, everything felt smooth again. The move-in date was set for 6 months later. We were organizing and packing. I felt hopeful. Elijah let his mom know when the house would be finished. Her response? Barely a shrug. Something told me she wasn't done yet. 6 months flew by, and before we knew it, the new house was finished. The layout was thoughtfully designed. My mother's room, the kitchen, and living area were all on the first floor for easy access. The upstairs had our private bedrooms nestled beneath the vaulted ceiling. But just as the house was ready, my mother's health began to decline. With Elijah and me both working full-time, she spent long stretches alone during the day. I often came home to find things out of place. Trash not taken out. Misplaced items, signs she'd forgotten what she was doing. The doctor warned us that inactivity could accelerate her symptoms, so we tried to keep her gently engaged. Small household tasks helped at first, but even those became difficult over time. She'd leave pans on the stove after cooking, forget to add detergent, or dump in too much and flood the laundry room with suds. Some mornings, she'd claim the newspaper never came, even though it was sitting right next to her. Every day brought new challenges. Eventually, Kai and I decided that enrolling her in a local adult day program would be the best option. At first, she seemed overwhelmed by the unfamiliar faces and routines. But soon, we saw a shift. She started coming home with stories about craft projects, social events, conversations she'd had at the center. She smiled more, laughed a little. For a while, things seemed stable. But it didn't last. Just a few months later, what seemed like a harmless cold turned into something much worse. Her appetite faded, her strength declined, and before we could even grasp what was happening, she was gone, taken by pneumonia. The grief hit me like a freight train. I cried for days, unable to fully process it, but grief doesn't pause life. There were endless calls to make, documents to file, relatives to inform, funeral arrangements to organize. It all came rushing at me too fast, too soon. As I was gathering documents, trying to get through the fog of it all, Elijah's mother showed up at the door, dragging several suitcases behind her. I assumed she'd come to help with the funeral. Felt genuinely thankful. I greeted her with a tired but sincere, "Thank you for coming. Please come in." But the moment she stepped through the door, she dropped a bomb. "I'll be living here now." I froze. I thought I'd misheard. But then she added, "If you don't like it, you can leave. Elijah and I will live here." Not a word about my mother. No condolences. Just a bold, entitled statement. I was too stunned to respond. She walked through the house like it was already hers. "Well, I assumed this moment would come," she said quietly, brushing her fingers along the wall. "Let's see. How's the layout? Does it suit me?" That's when it hit me. Her constant messages during construction, her endless suggestions about the design. She had always planned on moving in. She thought she was orchestrating her future space, not just being helpful. And now, with my mother gone, she must have seen her chance. Rushed over after Elijah told her the news. Before I could gather my thoughts, Elijah stepped in. "Mom," he said calmly, "didn't you know? This house doesn't belong to me. It was Madison's mother's property." "What?" she snapped, spinning to face him. "And now that Madison's mother has passed, the house will go to her brother." She blinked in disbelief. "What are you talking about? The man should be the one listed as the homeowner. Elijah earns more. Madison couldn't possibly afford this house on her salary. Don't be ridiculous. This house obviously belongs to Elijah. What kind of daughter-in-law tries to claim ownership like this? Elijah, back me up." Elijah tried to respond, but I stepped in before he could. "It's fine. I'll explain," I said quietly. His mother narrowed her eyes. "What exactly do you think you're going to explain?" "I pay the mortgage. My brother and I split the costs. Elijah hasn't contributed financially to this house at all. She turned to Elijah. Is that true? He nodded. Yes, it is. I continued. From the beginning, we built this house knowing it would eventually go to Kai. With my mom gone, he and his wife and her parents will be moving in. That was always the plan. She stood there dumbfounded. After a long pause, she scowled and muttered, That's outrageous. I took care of your mother. I waited my turn. I deserve to live here now. I have a lawyer friend. I'll talk to him about contesting the inheritance. This is just too much. Of course, she hadn't helped with anything. Not caregiving, not finances, nothing. But she was clearly spiraling, unable to accept that the house would never be hers. Your brother is coming soon, right? She said. Good. I'll explain everything to him myself. He needs to hear my side. I'm not shy about these things. I'll make it clear that I want this inheritance passed on to Elijah. She planted herself on the couch and waited. Elijah kept apologizing to me in hushed tones. I'm so sorry. I didn't see this coming. I didn't know she'd do this. Don't worry, I said. She's not going to listen to us anyway. We'll settle this when Kai gets here. Meanwhile, my mother-in-law was on the phone in the other room, speaking to her lawyer. Yes, I believe they'll agree to it, she said sweetly. Please prepare the paperwork. I'll keep you updated. About an hour later, a car pulled into the driveway. He's here, I called. She jumped up like she'd been waiting for her moment. Once I get this house in Elijah's name, everything will fall into place, she said confidently. She strode into the living room to meet him. But the second the door opened and Kai stepped in, everything changed. She opened her mouth to speak. Nothing came out. Her eyes widened. She slumped onto the couch as if her legs had given out. Now, Kai has a bit of an imposing presence. He's a surfer, always out in the sun, and it shows. His skin is tanned, his head shaved for convenience. His build is large and muscular from years of outdoor labor. There's an old scar on his forehead, the kind that looks more sinister than it really is. He got it in elementary school during a fall, but people often mistake it for something more violent. He doesn't smile much around strangers either. Let's just say he doesn't exactly radiate approachable. And when he spoke, his voice was cold. So, you wanted to talk to me about this house? She tried to find. I thought I might live here now that Madison's mother is gone. But then I heard you're moving in, and, well, I didn't realize the situation. Did Madison ever tell you this house would be yours? We had a very clear agreement before it was built. No, she mumbled, but I gave input on the floor plan. I thought that meant something. Did you help my sister in any way? Financially? Emotionally? No, nothing like that. So you made no commitment, gave no support, and simply assumed that offering a few decorating tips entitled you to live here? She lowered her eyes. I'm sorry, it was my mistake. At first, Kai gave me a questioning look, as if trying to make sense of what he was hearing. But then he turned to my mother-in-law and shut down her outrageous claims with barely contained disgust. She seemed to misread his reaction as anger rather than rejection, and suddenly her demeanor shifted. She bowed her head, grew oddly submissive. Just because our mother passed away, Kai said flatly, doesn't mean there was ever a conversation about sharing this house with our sister's in-laws. Isn't that right, Madison? Of course, I said. I never told her anything about moving in. I only ever said this place was meant for my mother to live with us. My mother-in-law covered her face with both hands, spoke in a fragile voice. I truly believed Elijah owned this house. I thought that after I took care of your mother, it would finally be my turn to live here. But looking after someone else's parent is no easy task, so I waited. And when Elijah told me she had passed, I assumed it was time. I even gave up my apartment. Now I have nowhere to go. I was stunned. She had made such a drastic move without a word from us. There had never been any promise, any plan. I'm sorry, Kai said coldly, but this house was never intended for you. When Madison and Elijah move abroad, this home is meant for me and my family. We're not interested in living with someone who's been disrespectful to us or our mother. He didn't yell, but the chill in his voice said enough. Though he tried to stay civil for my sake, I could feel his temper rising. My mother-in-law looked to Elijah and me for support, but we stood firm. Actually, I said, we're moving overseas soon because of Elijah's job. Yeah, Mom, Elijah added. You know, I work for a multinational company. We've talked about this before. There was always a chance I'd be sent abroad. The original plan had been to stay and care for my mother until the move. Now, with her gone, we were following through. Kai and his wife would take over the house, just as we'd arranged. I can't believe this, my mother-in-law muttered, her face falling. Elijah and I exchanged a look. We didn't want to leave her homeless, even if her behavior had been inappropriate. If you don't have a place to go, I said gently, you could come with us overseas. We both knew she'd refuse. You know I hate flying, she said instantly, and I don't even have a passport. Then you'll need to figure something else out, Elijah said. But we're leaving soon. You wouldn't have time to get your documents in order, much less prepare for an international move. The spark had gone from her voice. She slumped in her chair, looking defeated. Elijah paused, then said, What about Nathan? Her head snapped up. No, don't contact Nathan. Nathan is Elijah's younger brother. My mother-in-law had set her sights on our home, but absolutely refused to consider living with Nathan and his wife, Sienna. But if you've got nowhere else to stay, isn't that your only option? Elijah pressed. What else can you do? She stared at the floor in silence, then looked up and said, Can't you just give me some money instead? I'm not living with that daughter-in-law. Elijah, Kai and I stepped out briefly to handle some final arrangements for the funeral. When we returned, my mother-in-law was sitting in the same spot, stiff and silent, clearly sulking at the idea of staying with Nathan. Let's get moving with the funeral prep, Elijah said, trying to reset the mood. We've got a little time, but there's a lot to do. We all sat down to go over the logistics. About an hour later, the doorbell rang. It was Sienna. She was dressed in a bright outfit, her neckline low, her earrings loud, like a blast from another era. But she greeted us with warmth and respect. I'm so sorry for your loss, she said, voice soft. I came as quickly as I could. Please forgive my appearance. I was caught off guard by how polite she was. But as soon as she stepped into the living room and spotted my mother-in-law, her tone shifted completely. All right, Grandma, let's cut the drama. Stop bothering Elijah and Madison. Let's go. She reached out and helped her mother-in-law to her feet, without waiting for a response. We originally offered to live together, remember? She said plainly. If you'd just said yes back then, you wouldn't be in this mess. But no, pride gets in the way. Come on now. Let's not make this harder than it needs to be. Then she turned to us with a half smile. Sorry for all the trouble. We'll be out of your hair now. And just like that, they were gone. Sienna had always been a little unconventional, but beneath the flashy clothes was someone kind and fiercely loyal. She and Nathan had long offered to have our mother live with them. When they got married, Sienna promised, We'll take care of her like family. But our mother, proud and independent to the end, chose to live alone instead. She really had her own way of doing things, Elijah said later with a bittersweet smile. Despite everything, I knew Sienna would take good care of my mother-in-law, and that finally, someone else was taking the reins. True to Elijah's prediction, his mother moved in with Nathan and Sienna without further protest. With Sienna around, she had no room to act out, and over time, she seemed to settle in. Elijah observed with a half laugh. She still complains all the time, but she never actually wants to live alone. She just likes the sound of her own grumbling. As for the house, everything went as planned. After Elijah and I left for Paris, Kai and his wife moved in, just as we'd agreed from the beginning. Over time, her parents joined them, and the house became a warm, multi-generational home. Kai continues to handle the mortgage, the same way we'd arranged it when the house was first built. Meanwhile, Elijah and I have started a new chapter in Paris. At first, the move felt overwhelming. New city, new language, new life. But thankfully, my French background smoothed the transition. I quickly found work teaching English, was able to draw on my years as a French instructor back in the States. The work culture here is more relaxed, shorter hours, weekends truly free. For the first time in years, Elijah and I have real time together.